For the past few months, I've been working on a podcast called Event Stars to help people in the events industry, and I've had some really fantastic opportunities to interview some superb people from the industry and beyond. But like many things at the moment, now is not the time to launch it. Now is a time where we need to come together and support each other for what is going to be truly difficult times ahead. So I've been switching it up a little bit while my business is pretty much at zero, and decided to do a podcast that can help people cut through the noise and help businesses hopefully grow and learn during this period. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that something good can come from it. If you've got any suggestions, then feel free to get in touch. Hello and welcome to another episode of Opportunity in Isolation. Tzvete Doncheva is the founder of Ecosystem, a project aiming to democratise access to the venture industry for less networked founders and junior VCs. Day to day, she works in venture capital as a visiting analyst at a supply chain focused early stage fund, helping out on deal flow activities and supporting the investment process. She previously worked at the London-based VC spin-out of multinational real estate investment manager Roundhill Capital. A core activity of her work has been identifying and assessing early stage startups, connecting key stakeholders, VCs, entrepreneurs and corporates, and building out innovation ecosystems. Tzvete is a mentor to female founders, a non-exec trustee at Girls in Charge, and part of Sharper Impact Capital, a community-led volunteer project connecting purpose-driven companies with impact investors. We touched on a number of topics in this podcast, including creating an online community of fans for your business, how COVID has changed things in terms of what is now possible with an online community. And we also spoke a lot about getting funding for your idea or business and how to go about it, which will come in especially useful if you're, like myself, engaging in an investment round. As always, I hope you find this useful and feel free to let me know your comments and thoughts. Happy listening and enjoy. Tzvete, first of all, thank you so much for coming on to Opportunity in Isolation today. Tell me where you're sitting at the moment. Not literally, but in which city?
Hi, Gurmej. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm calling in from Berlin, Germany. So I have been here for a few weeks now, so quite new to the city, but it's been a good experience so far.
And what are you doing there for work?
So right now I'm a visiting analyst at Amplifier, and Amplifier is a venture capital fund and innovation unit investing across the supply chain.
Okay, excellent. Well, we'll come on to that a little bit later. But we met on an online community really called Lunch Club, and we had a great discussion. For anyone who's not on Lunch Club, you can drop me a message and I can send you a link to getting on there, because it's a great way to just network with people from around the world, and especially in the times that we're living in at the moment. We're able to do that at a touch of a button, and you don't have to actually go and meet them physically. But we talked a lot about community, and we talk about community online, and you're what I would call a bit of a specialist in that. So what does community mean in terms of the online world that we're living in right now?
I'm not sure whether I'm a specialist
in
that, but definitely I think the environment that we are right now has kind of forced a lot of interactions from the physical world to be taking place online. So therefore, the need for people to connect and the need for them to engage in certain online environment, I think it's not only greater, but it's more of a necessity in order to continue working, in order to continue interacting and to make new connections. As you mentioned, Lunch Club is one such platform, but it's really important to utilize technology in the way that we can support both existing connections and making new ones. So for me, I think community, it doesn't need to be a community, a set community, I would say. A brand can have its members be connected through some sort of shared values, for example, and this can gradually turn into an environment where they can add value, whether this is through exchanging ideas, whether this is through exchanging some sort of services. But I think for me, an online community is an environment where like-minded individuals are essentially adding value to one another in a way, whether this is, again, through resource sharing or some kind of goods sharing, for example. And I think, in the current environment, obviously, it's super important to maintain these connections. And we have seen definitely new tools coming up that are more specialized. And also, I think we are seeing kind of this unbundling of bigger platforms, such as, for example, Facebook, and different new websites or different new apps that are being used for more niche communities.
You mentioned Facebook. That's one such, mass community. But what are some of the other communities that you think people would have heard of and can relate to?
I think for me personally, as a woman in tech, I'm quite supportive of communities that are exactly helping to level kind of the playing field for female founders, and also to support in a way the exchange between female investors. So I think one that I personally like a lot is Women of Wearables, and it's for women in technology, also for women who are operating in the field of kind of health tech, wearables. So I do recommend for all female founders to check it out. You had a question?
No, definitely. I was just going to say that we spoke about Facebook first, and that would be like I said earlier, a community for the masses, whereas what you're talking about is more of a niche. Would you say that having a niche would make a community more successful?
I think in the very beginning, you have to have a strong kind of a pulling factor in order to get the right members, to get the right people that actually want to be part of this community, and they have the right reasons to be part of this community. Because in in the very beginning, it's very important to have the right set of rules. It's very important to lay kind of the ground rules of what is accepted, what is tolerated in this community, and it is much more easier to do it once there isn't as many members. And I think sometimes if you are going after scale, you are I guess there is a balance. For example, with Facebook, there are so many users, but the activity is not uniform across. And I think for small brands, they should focus on exactly targeting a particular niche and making sure that they understand this niche. They understand what is going to add value to these people that relate to this, whether it's a certain problem, whether it's a type of service that they find commonality with, and be able to engage with them better.
Definitely. It's something that I've thought about a lot in our business. We're in the events and travel business when it comes to groups. And we always have to think, what can we do to differentiate ourselves with our customers? Sorry, let me say that again. We always have to think, what do we need to do to differentiate ourselves between our competitors? Because in a very price competitive market, it's important that people recognize who you are. And we thought about community and how we can get people engaging with us. So what tips or what steps should someone like myself take to create a community?
I think in the very beginning, as mentioned, it's important to understand who the people that you want to attract into this environment are, and to identify perhaps your target audience. So that's really important, and to in the beginning, it's a lot to do with adding value, I would say, in advance and before you even have this community base. And slowly, if people find out about this community, and if people see that they are actually, for example, they spend their time and they get a good a return in terms of ROI for their time, they would slowly be sharing it, and they will be slowly bringing new members or new contacts of theirs into this environment, which is going to be slowly expanding. So I think that is going to be my first tip in terms of identifying and knowing exactly who you are, who your users should be. And once you know, you should perhaps create some kind of content in order to start engaging with them in the very beginning. And we have seen that, for example, we mentioned Facebook, but we are seeing even in physical communities, physical membership organizations, there is a decrease in both their membership and in their engagement. So obviously people are looking for more ways to be close to each other. I think that's really important with online. You can create a connection with someone who is not even in your country, and the opportunity that is there because of technology, we could leverage it right now.
Definitely. And I think what you keep saying is how to add value. I think that's so important. So when I think about events or the travel industry, it could be something like top tips in a particular destination. I mean, you're sitting in Berlin. What are the best 5 restaurants to go and visit in Berlin while you're there? Or if you're on a bachelor party, it could be the best 5 nightclubs to go and visit. So I think it's giving that kind of value to your customers and not asking for anything back, just adding value.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also, as your community grows or as your membership grows, it is also finding ways to, first of all, give back to them, and second of all, kind of incentivize them to be more engaged. So whether this is through, let's say you are creating a certain content piece that will highlight the most active members, or once these users are there, they're obviously interested in what you have to offer. So then it's the point of educating them, and it's the point of making sure that they are engaged within this platform or within this. Let's say that you're doing a newsletter, you could be doing some kind of a write-up that goes out to the members, or you have to find the way that works for you. And there is definitely a lot of different ways to create content. So perhaps that's also related to who your target users are and how do they consume content.
And from what you're saying, it doesn't have to be an expensive exercise either, does it?
No, I think most, especially most niche communities, they start on a platform that either it could be Slack, it could be Facebook, it could be a different, it could be Chalk, for example. Chalk is an app that I've been looking at recently, and it's quite, actually, I would recommend you checking it out. It's for voice first ways to connect with your community, so you could create voice rooms. Those are all platforms that are at large free, and you could I guess the challenge there is that you have to, once you're creating this community, you have to make sure that your membership base goes onto this platform. And for example, if it's a Facebook group, joins another Facebook group. And what would make them, you have to think about what would make them visit this Facebook group and be active in that Facebook group, as opposed to, all the other Facebook groups that are out there.
Yeah, and just getting 1,000 alerts a day and just ignoring them all. I mean, that's the key, isn't it? What is it that's going to be attracting them to come back day after day? And somebody actually gave me a tip when it comes to Facebook groups, that if you actually go live like once every week or something like that, then everybody on that community actually gets a notification that you're live. And even if they tune in for a couple of seconds, at least you're still connecting with them. But then it's your job as the community host to ensure that they stay on for more than a couple of seconds, because you are giving them value straight away.
Yeah, exactly. As you are building this kind of mini civilization almost, you're the person that controls, sets the tone, controls what is considered the norms and attitude that should be followed. I think back to my point of who your users are. Let's say that your users are very active on Facebook, then it makes a lot of sense that your community is a Facebook group, because this is the medium that they're checking out the most regularly. Personally, I am very not active on Facebook, so it would not be the ideal community for me. But if I feel a belonging, if I feel a sense of belonging to this community, then it would make me check out this group, just because I know that this adds value. And I think it's very important to create. If you are building something from scratch, don't try to be everything to everyone, because that is just not going to work. But try to establish a niche, try to establish a certain expertise within a very, very particular, it could be a skill, it could be an area of expertise that you are able to add value to these users, whether it's, how to create an event, or how to, it could be anything related to the event industry that you could choose. And then this is the value that they would receive in terms of a resource. And you could, it's important to create some kind of regularity. So let's say that you're doing a Facebook Live, do it it could be every Tuesday in a certain predicted time. I think that would help.
Yeah, and I think that's another thing that's key. You mentioned the word regularity, and also just being consistent and just having a plan and what you're going to do. Don't just set up a community and think, all right, what do I do next? You need to have a content plan like you would with anything else. And even if you have to bring someone else in who might manage that for you, because you're busy running the business or whatever it might be, that's fine. But again, you need to have a plan, I think, to make sure that you are being consistent. Otherwise, people will just switch off in the end.
Yeah, and I think there is definitely a trend right now that is going on in the tech world, in the tech communities, of building in public and being actively engaged with the first users, because your first users are actually going to be, they're almost so valuable to you, because they're giving you feedback as well, that they're much more than users. They are the feedback that they would give you, it's going to help you shape your product. And so if you are a founder and if you're building in public, I think you would find that certain people will be a lot more tolerable to, let's say, your journey, and will be a lot more willing to engage and be able to help you with their feedback, which I think is really important.
Could you just clarify what you mean by building in public? Do you mean that you're showing the world that, I'm just trying this out at the moment?
For example, Twitter. You asked me about different social media networks. I'm not a huge fan of Facebook, but I like Twitter. And I think for a founder to be active on Twitter and to be shared, for example, let's say that you are in your journey of transitioning your business from offline to online, and these are the steps that you have taken. These are, for example, the experiences that you've had, or the challenges that a certain challenge, how you have overcome it. You could even ask for advice on Twitter, and I think that's very valuable. And you can connect with other founders. You can obviously also find your early users on Twitter, because of all the tools and all the hashtags, for example, that are as features there. But I think it's definitely useful to, even there are so many founders that are asking for advice if they are to go a certain, in between, if they're in between two options and they're asking which one to choose. I think that's really interesting. Someone who has done that, I think, quite well, and is very engaged within both I guess the users of the platform, but also he's adding value to the whole tech community, is Austin Aurid from Lambda School. So I would advise founders to check him out, and certainly through his journey, by sharing his journey, he has added a lot of value to the entire tech community.
Can you just mention that name one more time, please?
So Austin Aurid from Lambda School.
Okay, Austin Aurid from Lambda School. Okay, we'll have to definitely check that out, and we'll put that in the show notes at the end. If you could maybe share a link with me on that, that'd be great. Now, you just said there that you have been successful in trying things out on Twitter, and you've actually started a community yourself called, it's about it's almost an ecosystem webinar. Would that be the right way to phrase it?
So you asked me before whether you have to first have the kind of have laid the groundwork, and also the certain I guess steps, and have a very clear plan in place before starting a community. I actually I guess to go back to how I got into tech. I got into tech from the startup side, and in the very beginning, my role at this startup was. It was actually a lot of things, because as a first employee at a startup, there is obviously a lot of activities that overlap. But one of the things was about creating the first initial traction, creating the brand of the startup, and getting these first early adopters or first users on board. And the way that I started to do it was through events, and those were offline events. I had partnered up with an organization called the Entrepreneurs Network, which is a leading think tank in the UK for entrepreneurs. And we started this breakfast formats, breakfast series. And without really, I didn't have this as a set goal or as a set plan, but by starting this event, by starting this regular activity, I saw that this is, one, adding value to the existing members, and two, it's great to attract new users and to create this kind of new awareness for what is the platform all about. And doing one after another from this kind of initiatives, I saw that it's very beneficial as a knowledge exchange and on the networking side for those involved. So I guess that's how, for me, that's how it started, creating events and making this type of ecosystem initiatives. And then I went into a different role at a Bosch-owned urban mobility co-creation hub called London Connectory. And there, my whole role was about this, creating this, right? It was ecosystem. I think a community is something smaller, whereas an ecosystem, it's already with different parties involved. So it's something larger. So the ecosystem is, I think there's 5 target groups that should be present within an ecosystem. So that's, the risk capital, so VC investors, the corporations, obviously the startups, and the entrepreneurs, founders, the public sector as well. It's really important to have this perspective, and also the academia. So this is kind of the, I guess, a key groups that should be present within an ecosystem. And with London Connectory, it was focused on transport innovation. So the events were at a much, I guess, larger scale than from the startup side. And I understood how valuable it is to create this kind of panels, this discussion, and how important it is to make sure that the structures are in place to continue this conversation. And I'm going off topic. I know you asked me about ecosystem, but I just want to give a background of why I started. Why I started that.
And you said that ecosystems need to have 5 key stakeholders. Would that be every ecosystem or ecosystem, or would it be just the one that you were talking about in particular?
I think for an ecosystem, I would say that those are the five groups that should be present. If you are, there are so many. I think there's so many ecosystem builders, I want to say, and so many ways of creating, adding value to even existing ecosystems. So you don't need to, create something from scratch. But I guess in order to understand what is, for example, let's say transport innovation, what are the topics that we should be discussing? What are the solutions that should be taking place? It is. I would say it is important to get the different perspectives together. Only by involving the founders, or only by involving, let's say, the public sector, it's not the same as if everyone is. Everyone can have and can add feedback to this.
And to what extent has COVID made it easier for you to do something like you're doing right now with the ecosystem webinars?
So yeah, exactly. To my point of this is how it all started. Then I went into PropTech VC, and my role was a platform role. So continuing on this ecosystem initiatives. And by the time that COVID hit, I felt that everyone was asking the same questions, and there was such a need for information, and there was such a, I guess, it was a situation that I personally had never experienced before, and to me, it was also on a different level because it's just very difficult to understand how to navigate. I think a different atmosphere and a different environment. So the way that I started ecosystem at first was webinar panels was because I wanted to bring together people with much wider expertise and with much more experience in the VC community, as this was the industry that this is the industry that I'm in, to be able to give their feedback and to be able to share their experience to first of all, founders who might not be VC funded, so they don't have these investors to give them advice. And second of all, to junior VCs, it could be to people within the different networks, that I could share it with. But the idea in the beginning was knowledge exchange, I would say less on the networking side, more on the kind of resource knowledge exchange. And it's very, I think you probably have seen it as well, but it's very difficult to replicate offline networking online. And there are many platforms that are, with certain specific features that could match you with people in one-to-one conversations, in one-to-one sessions. I think Launch Club is quite good in what they do, but in general, if you are in a webinar or if you are in a conversation that has multiple people, it's quite difficult to create this network, the same networking opportunities.
Yeah, I think being in the events industry, I know that there are a lot of platforms that have come alive during COVID, and one of the things that people are trying to do is create hybrid events where you have some element which is live. You might have a live stage where people are actually attending, and the rest of the conference might be online, like the customers or the general public would be just watching online. But you're right, people are trying to recreate what people do walking around an exhibition hall, which is just walking around, talking to people on different stands, mingling, maybe having a drink at the bar or whatever it might be. These are all part of the conference. The reason why people go to conferences, it's not just about the content all the time, which is obviously very important, but there is a big need to have that one-to-one, face-to-face contact as well. And whoever cracks that in the online world, they'll be the winners. But we're not there yet, and I know there's a lot of people putting a lot of money into working out how we can recreate that.
For sure, and I think that's just to finish up on the kind of format and how ecosystem started was in the beginning it was webinar panels, which was panel discussions with a few speakers. As I mentioned, the kind of core, I would say, would be knowledge sharing. And then I found out that people would, for example, because I do them as Zoom meetings, so anybody can see who is in the meeting, and if they are, it's just much more likely that you would want to connect with someone if you see that you are attending the same, same session, the same event. So I found out that a lot of people had actually, reached out and be like, oh, I was on this webinar. I saw that you also were on the same session, and this is kind of one common link that is already created. And I guess this is one of the ways that networking opportunities could be replicated, just by creating this kind of common element. Yeah. And then, I think it's normal that everything moved online, and so many conferences cannot be in the real world for another few months at least. But I felt like, in the beginning, it felt like there was already the ecosystem was getting enough information, or not enough information, but a lot more information. So then I realized that one of the important things is actually to understand how each investor thinks and how each investor assesses startups and assesses founders. And this would be more valuable to the founders and to the junior VCs watching. So that's why I changed the format to fireside chats with ecosystem giants, because I wanted to understand what is the individual, for example, experience of this investor, and to find out more about how they go about even how did they go about raising funds, because obviously VC firms as well have to raise externally from LPs. And I thought that this is going to be much more helpful to founders as well, because the aim with this initiative and the aim with the newsletter that I started around that is actually to make it easier and to help founders on their fundraising journey. And I think a lot of the founders, there is a different, the founders that I find are watching ecosystem giants sessions, for example, are from different stages. Some have never raised funding before, others have raised seed. And there are a lot of participants and a lot of viewers who are in the VC world themselves. So I've tried to create this kind of content that will be beneficial to all.
This brings me nicely onto my next question. If you're working in a VC, a venture capitalist at the moment, venture capital firm in Berlin, if someone has a great idea, when do they know that they need funding? Because there might be some people who are just starting a business, who are just within 2 years of starting a business. When would you say they know they need funding?
I don't think that there is a set moment that could be the same for everyone. I think, first of all, when someone is creating a certain type of business, or when they're starting their entrepreneurial journey, they also have to understand what type of financing is right for them, whether they need to go out and seek for, let's say, venture capital, or whether they need external capital at this stage. And there are a lot of different types of VC firms. So some invest at pre-seed and at idea stage. Others invest when you have initial traction, when you have initial product market fit. Others, you would have to have commercial validation and show a certain recurring revenue, for example. So I think in order for me, I cannot give a general advice, but it's more about the founder to know where do they even want to get within their business. So, for example, let's say that you want to grow organically and you don't want this high scale, then perhaps venture capital is not the right funding for you.
And when would you know whether it's a venture capitalist that you need to go and seek funding from, or say an angel, a private investor?
So I think, angels, I would say that there are certain kind of steps that you would go for. So first, you're most likely to be bootstrapping while you test and you see whether, you are actually solving a real problem, whether, getting the market feedback of what you're trying to do and whether it's an actual pain point that you have discovered. I think that's one of my first tips would be that to make sure that you can test this idea quickly with as many people as you can, and don't be afraid to share, for example, what you're working on. I think in some cases, entrepreneurs who are just starting out are afraid to share, for example, what they're working on. I think you would find that in entrepreneurial communities, I mentioned one about female founders, but there are many entrepreneurial communities. You would find that founders are willing to help other founders in the early stages, and the conversations that you might have with fellow entrepreneurs are going to be one of the most beneficial ones that you're going to have. So don't be afraid to share and get into these communities, I would say, quickly. In the beginning, you are most likely to be bootstrapping your company, and you wouldn't have external funding. Then it would be, the friends and family that would likely get involved, and then it would be, I would say, if you have built. You don't always need to have, a working MVP, but it depends on also your own networks too. Let's say that you're, at that stage where you are able to secure financing from angels. And I think if you are going after this route, so for angels, I guess how it would differ is they wouldn't be seeking for the same, they wouldn't have the criteria as set perhaps, as a venture capital firm would. But for venture capital, I think, obviously we are looking for high returns, and we are looking for a scalable business. So that's again why I said that, for example, if your journey is to grow organically, perhaps you should seek, and right now there's so many different opportunities. For example, there is a lot of grants, there is a lot of alternative ways that you could find to finance your business, but you have to also be ready to spend the time looking for these different routes for financing.
Yeah, sure. And I think I read on your LinkedIn somewhere that having direct contact with an investor makes you 13 times more likely to get investment. So does that mean knowing someone through a connection rather than just reaching out to them, say on LinkedIn, cold?
So this is not my words. This is a statistics, but it was included, in an article that I did for Startups magazine. But it is, I think that's one of the reasons why, for example, there is a lot less women that get funded, and there is a certain way that the system needs to change, because whatever we are saying, it's always important. The individual networks are always just there, and for investors for you to be able to get to investors, of course you can code outreach, and of course you can send, like as you said, a LinkedIn message, code email. I think there is definitely a positive change within that system that this is something that is not only accepted, but it's welcomed, right? We are welcoming for people to reach out and to be able to, obviously, if you are working on something interesting and if you are solving a real industry pain point, of course, we want to know about it. But in reality, I think there is still this I guess prioritization of referrals or of companies that are closely referred. And this is, the statistics has said that, for example, people who have been referred or people who have received a direct introduction are more, I think the statistic was that they're more likely to get to IC, which is the investment committee at a VC firm. And that's just, something that we should all work on. And I hope that with this Ecosystem Giants events, because I know that there are a lot of founders that reach out to the speakers after the event and say that, for example, I have seen you on this event, what you said about this, and it's very specific. I think that resonates with me, and I want to, for example, share what I'm working on. And I think this is one touch point that you create with this investor. So my advice to people who don't have these close networks, or they don't have direct referrals to investors, is to research them, to find out, what you can create or what you can find online, because that's the other benefit, right? Because there is so much information online. And be specific, target your initial email to them, create a touch point, and I would say that you're a lot more likely to get a response from investors.
Yeah, and I think at the same time, make sure you're targeting investors that would have an interest in your area of expertise or your startup. You don't want to be, for example, we're in events. If we're just targeting people who are doing fintech, then we're not going to get anywhere. So it's important to make sure that those investors do have knowledge and experience in that space as well.
You're giving the advice, the right advice. Exactly what founders should do is they should reach out to. They should, I guess, prepare before reaching out to investors, so to identify the ones that have similar interests, are at the same stage as well, that are investing in the right stage, and also same geographies is also beneficial, and identify the investor that you could find most things in common with, and if he has invested in similar businesses, even better.
And I think the other thing is, because I've been going through this journey, is don't take things to heart. 90% of those people you reach out to won't even get back to you, especially if it's cold. Even though you've done your research and they're in that field, some people just reply bluntly with no, or no thanks, not interested. But then, it is a numbers game as well. You have to kiss a lot of frogs to find your prince or princess, if that's the right way of putting it. And it is going to be a time-consuming exercise as well.
I think you have to understand as a founder that obviously you should not take it personal, and you have to also understand that if you don't, let's say that you don't get a response for 1 week or for 10 days, then you could follow up one more time, and then I would say more within the community. I would say more likely than not, if someone receives a targeted email that is super targeted, very clear what your proposition is, what is your ask? Do you want to have an intro call and kind of catch up for just a general catch up? Do you want to actually have an intro call to pitch for funding? Like, what is the ask there? Then you're much more likely to get a response. And if you don't, then don't take it personally. Just don't follow up too many times as well. Go to someone else, because as a founder, you are going to be partnering up with this firm or with this investor for a long period. So you want to also identify the people that you would want to partner to be your long-term partners. And I think there's two very strong trends that I'm seeing. One is obviously if you don't have a direct introduction, if you don't have a direct connection, it's quite difficult to even get to this first call stage, and after that to progress to the later stages of the investment process. And then on the other side, if you are, for example, if you are a repeat founder who has exited successfully, or who is, or you have worked at a scale up, let's say if you already have this kind of expertise or this experience that investors would value, then in many cases, actually, the way that you are reaching out to investors is completely different. I mean, the time for due diligence has decreased. You are going into rounds that are with very high valuations, with a lot of interested parties involved at the same time. And then it's the cards are almost in the founder's hands of choosing who to partner with.
Yeah, no, for sure. And this podcast is all about opportunity in isolation. What are the opportunities that VCs are looking at right now? What are the trends out there?
Well, I cannot speak broadly for across the spectrum of venture capital, but I think one, obviously, we know that there is a lot of industry disruptions caused by the current situation, and brought by, or perhaps it's challenges that were already existent that are now much more heightened and much more clear. So I would say if your solution is somehow targeting an existing challenge within an industry that was bound to happen, and right now it's a need for this to take place, then it would be really interesting. Obviously, remote work, I think future of work, these are sectors, digital health, for example, that are big COVID beneficiaries. I would say that there are certain industries, such as, for example, travel, hospitality, that are definitely more badly affected by COVID. But ultimately, there are so many. In the time of crisis, there is also a lot of opportunity. One is, these founders that, for example, are creating solutions that are solving their own pain points when it comes to communication, or when it comes to communities, for example, because we are seeing that there's so many ways that you could improve the existing software, right? Whether it's the static way that perhaps Zoom is, or the way that platforms even like Slack are missing some features that you might need. And this is creating a sense of founders going out there trying to solve them. I think it's really really interesting. Right now, the sector that I'm looking at is supply chain. So I'm eager to hear from founders who are early stage founders operating within the supply chain.
And when you say supply chain, what could be an example? You don't have to give away anything that you're not supposed to talk about, but what could be an example of a supply chain
So
problem
supply
that
chain
found?
is anything that optimizes the movement of goods. We are looking at solutions that are from deep ocean to last mile. So let's say fulfillment optimization. I think one of the areas that I've seen that is really interesting within different industries is this kind of paper-based and Excel-based processes across the kind of value chain, and a lot of entrepreneurs who are looking to target those.
In terms of putting it in a place that is more automated rather than Excel and paper-based, and just creating one system that can consolidate it all?
Yeah, automating and connecting it, exactly as you said, into one system. That could be in different sectors, but it's definitely needed. Previously, I was working at a real estate fund, prop tech fund, so as well there is a lot of paper-based processes, and I think in industries that are more resistant to change, there is also even more opportunity.
Definitely, and I think I'm glad you spoke about travel and hospitality because, like you said, at the moment, it would seem on the surface that nobody would want to touch us with a barge pole in terms of anything to do with travel and hospitality. But then you have to ask the question, it's not like travel and hospitality is going to go away for the entirety of the duration of the world's being. It's just that this is the situation that we're currently facing ourselves with. And for those in the travel and hospitality sector, what I would say is that there is going to be a lot of opportunity because a lot of businesses are going to die because of this in our sector, which means that there'll be more for everyone else at the end of it. So it's just a case of getting through this stage, and as you keep saying, just innovating and looking for solutions.
Innovate and iterate, but also I think if you are in a sector that I think we have likely spoken a lot about maximizing on your internal processes and making sure that you have enough runway. All these steps, most founders have already taken them quite a long time ago. So without repeating this, but another important element I would say is to work on your product and to make sure that once this situation finally normalizes and goes back, and we go back to a more a time that is more I guess close to normal, you are able to be really on top of your game, and you're able to meet the requirements of your customers. And don't forget for your existing customers, make sure that you're adding value to them, whether it's in a community setting or in something else. And also don't forget to reach out to potential new customers and build out this network.
You've seen a lot of pitch decks. What makes a good pitch deck?
What makes a good pitch deck? I think it is very important to be able to clearly communicate your USP, or what makes your solution, for example, 10 times better than what else is existing on the market. And I think at early stage, what is most important for me is to understand who is the team behind this solution, what is their individual expertise, why is it that they're the best team who are going to deliver on this solution. So you definitely have to have a strong team slide. I would say if you are doing a PowerPoint presentation, you should have a team slide. You should have a slide that clearly specifies the problem that you are solving, and why now, why is the right time for your solution to be funded right now, what are the market dynamics, how big is the market, what is obviously your solution, what is your product, and what stage is your solution, or what stage is your startup at as well. Because I think from what I have seen, there are a lot of pitch decks that clearly they talk about the market, they talk about the solution that should exist there, and they talk about the problem, but it's not very clear to me at what stage is their proposition at. So make sure that you clearly communicate that as well in the very beginning. And also, if you are, let's say that you have an MVP already live, you have a product that you can demonstrate, it's always great to send either a video or a product demo along with your presentation. I think we spoke about future of work, we spoke about different tools. There are so many different ways that you could structure your presentation, and you don't have to do it in the static PowerPoint way. So for example, I really like Notion as a tool. So if you are able to communicate your vision clearly on Notion with a very interactive way, that obviously will stand out. And make sure to stand out. That is kind of my last piece of advice. And on the product demo side, platform that I like, or a tool that I like, is Loom.
It's what? Sorry, Loom.
Loom, yeah.
Loom. Okay, because that's really interesting, because traditionally I've just thought do a presentation on PowerPoint, send it over. But what you're trying to say is make it more interactive and actually show people what your product or your app or your web platform does.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be able, in this seconds, for example, that an investor is going to glance through your presentation, to be able to, once they're already looking at it, to be able to kind of make it as easy for them as possible to schedule this intro call or to take it to the next step. And especially if you are in a sector that is like, let's say, future of work, even the event industry, there are so many different creative ways that you could structure the pitch that could help you stand out, that I would say, definitely try to leverage on that.
Okay, so it isn't sorry, let me just say that again, cut that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a PowerPoint presentation, but you could actually just do like a video presentation.
I think it's helpful to have the slides and to be able to go back and see whether it's a Notion but just have the information somehow structured in front of you. Notion is another platform where you could clearly take the time to either expand upon what is the solution, what is the problem that you're solving. But you don't need to know that I don't think that you need to have, PowerPoint presentation as a necessity as it was previously. And there are different tools that are helping within even this kind of pitch process.
Brilliant. But what would you say the differences are between the startups that have succeeded both in getting funding and post-funding versus those that have not succeeded?
So what is the difference between a startup that gets funded and a startup that doesn't?
Okay, well, let's start with that one, but then I want to break it down one more time and say, after they had funding, what is the difference between those that succeed and that don't?
Oh, okay, got it. So from the startups that get funded, what is the difference between those who succeed and those who don't? I think for a founder, it's really important to be able to motivate, first of all, even themselves as a founder, but also to be able to hire well and to be able to motivate the team and to be able to create, able to create a team that is really able to help him on this journey to maximize and to achieve their vision. So I think hiring is really important, being able to hire well and also being able to delegate too. I think those are really crucial skills. Being able to prioritize well, it's super important. I don't know whether that, I think there are many reasons why, startups fail. It's not only one reason, but it's definitely, at early stage, I would say it's a lot to do with the individual founder and the team that they've surrounded themselves with. On the investor side, some firms are very involved and are even providing operational support to founders. Others are not as involved. So you have to also, as a founder, be able to differentiate and be able to go for the investors that would fit better with your overall vision. But I would say, other than the market trends and the market situation that we cannot really predict. For example, the COVID environment, this is something that is outside of the control, but also how you adapt and how well you are able to, pivot your solutions. There have been a lot of, founders that needed to pivot because of what has happened. So being able to, how well you are able to make decisions, I think it's super important. how well you and how quickly you're able to make decisions that are with limited amount of information too. And I think as you would know much better than me, because I'm not a founder, but taking fast decisions is crucial, and being able to perform after a decision is taken. And I think it's not, as I said, it's not only one thing that differentiates the startups that have failed and the startups that have succeeded. But if you cannot take good calculated decisions, and if you don't have a good sense of judgment, you can. This is something that actually Marvin Liao said in a ecosystem initiative of mine beforehand. But if you're taking a decision that deteriorates, like let's say 20% one, the other 20% more, and the other, it's already you're at 60%. So overall, this will really hurt the overall structure and the overall vision of your startup.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say, especially in a period like this for a lot of businesses, is resilience as well, and understanding that you are going to have ups and downs, and decision making is important. Obviously you have to get it right more times than you get it wrong to succeed, but when you do get it wrong, it's not the end of the world. And I think that is what is so important for a lot of people who are starting a business or in business.
Yeah, how do you adapt from here? Where do we go from here? And I think you have to understand, if you are VC funded and if you are VC backed, and you have, a certain, you have a partner and you have somebody who can help you on your board, for example, be open with them, make sure that you notify them, or be able to communicate the bad and the good information quickly. I would say, and don't be afraid to ask for help as well.
Definitely. And any final thoughts before we close this today? It's been great having you on. I mean, you've talked about a lot, and I just wondered if you might have any advice for people on either starting a business. I mean, we've spoken a lot about it, or just any other final thoughts that you might want to share.
Final thoughts that I might want to share. Well, if you are we could link the next Ecosystem Giants seminar that is
Definitely.
on the 20th of October, and the one after that is on the 27th. But yeah, my whole vision with this project is exactly that: to be able to help founders on their fundraising journey within, either hearing from investors or either seeing these resources from the newsletter. So I would love to hear feedback on that. And if you are working across the supply chain, feel free to reach out as well.
Yeah, and if you just send me any sort of information that might be relevant to put in the show notes, I'll put those in, and people can find out where to contact you. Tzvete, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you for your time whilst sitting in Berlin on a Saturday afternoon. So I appreciate that, taking the time out, and hopefully we'll touch base again very soon.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and watching. If you've got any suggestions or any feedback, then feel free to get me on Twitter at GurmejSP or Insta at events_Gurmej, spelled Gurmej. Thank you for listening. Catch you soon.